Raise both hands to your face, right now. Not to adjust anything. Not to rub your eyes or scratch an itch. Place both palms flat and open against your cheeks, fingertips touching your temples, thumbs resting just below your jaw. Close your eyes. Feel. Not the skin as surface. Feel the structure underneath it. The ridge of the cheekbone under your left index finger. The slight give of the buccal fat pad. The harder resistance of the mandible along your jawline. Move your fingertips slowly across your nose from bridge to tip. Press very gently against your closed eyelids and feel the slight tension of the orbicularis muscle that encircles them. Place your fingertips on your upper lip and feel the minute architecture of the philtrum. Press along your forehead from center to temple, and notice how the skin moves slightly differently over the frontalis muscle compared to the temporal bone beneath your fingers. Now hold your face in both hands without pressing, just containing. Feel the temperature of your own cheeks against your palms, slightly warmer than the surrounding air, slightly cooler than you expected. Notice that you are perceiving something you have almost never touched this slowly. You have spent years looking at this face. In the last 30 seconds, you have felt it for perhaps the first time. What you are doing, right now, is feeding your brain a type of information about your own face that it almost never receives. And somewhere in the regions behind your forehead, a map that was always slightly wrong is quietly being corrected. Here is what almost no one tells you. The face that other people see when they look at you has never once existed in your experience. Not approximately. Not partially. Never. The image others carry of your face is assembled from hundreds of glances taken from shifting angles, at varying distances, under different lights, across the span of time in which you were thinking, reacting, laughing, distracted, annoyed, moved by something you were trying to conceal. Their version of your face is dynamic, temporally averaged, multidirectional. It contains information about how your face moves between expressions, the microcontractions, the habitual asymmetries, the slight lag of the left side versus the right when you smile, the particular way tension settles into your brow before you are consciously aware of feeling tense. You have never seen any of that. What you have seen is a flat, reversed, motionless image, held under a quality of scrutiny that no one else applies to you, from a single fixed angle, at a distance calibrated for grooming rather than recognition. The two images, yours and theirs, are not different versions of the same thing. They are the products of two entirely different measurement systems, operating at two entirely different scales. The problem is not psychological. The problem is physical, and understanding it requires going all the way down to how the body represents itself. If this is the kind of science that makes you look at your own body differently, mechanisms, not metaphors, physics you can feel, subscribe and leave a like. There is more in this series that will do the same thing. Scale is the first thing physics teaches you. When I was working on the theory of special relativity, what struck me was not the mathematics. It was the recognition that most of what we believe about motion is calibrated for a very specific range of speeds, the speeds that human bodies encounter in a human lifetime. The intuitions were not wrong. They were wrong at the wrong scale. The same thing is true of self-perception. The mental model you carry of your own face was calibrated at a scale that was never the right one for the job it was asked to do. Think about what the number means. In the time it takes you to glance at a mirror, evaluate your appearance, and look away, a process that takes perhaps 2 to 4 seconds. The people who know you well have accumulated more than 3,000 hours of watching your face in motion. 3,000 hours against 4 seconds. Your model was built at one scale. Their model was built at a scale 60 million times larger. At that ratio, the two models are not describing the same object any more than a satellite photograph of a coastline describes the experience of walking it barefoot. Every zoom level reveals a different coast. Every temporal scale reveals a different face. The body structure responsible for this discrepancy is one of the most complex information processing architectures in biology. Most people have heard of the motor cortex, the strip of neural tissue that controls voluntary movement. and the somatosensory cortex, which processes touch. Fewer people know that the face has a disproportionately enormous representation in both. If you were to draw the body the way the brain maps it, a technique called the cortical homunculus, formalized by Wilder Penfield at McGill University in the 1930s and 1940s through direct electrical stimulation of exposed cortical tissue, the result would be grotesque. A creature with enormous hands, huge lips, a massive tongue, and a face whose surface area in neural tissue dwarfs the entire torso. Your face, as the brain maps it, is larger than your legs, your back, and your abdomen combined. But here is what the homunculus does not show. That enormous cortical real estate dedicated to the face is almost entirely allocated to motor output and tactile input, to moving the face and feeling things that touch it. The visual representation of your own face, in the brain, is comparatively small, and it is built from a fundamentally impoverished data set. The razor sentence is this: your brain's model of your face was constructed from a mirror, and a mirror is the one instrument most specifically designed to give you the least representative sample possible. A mirror is a single point of view, held at a single distance, in a single moment of time. It shows you a laterally inverted image, which means your dominant hemisphere, the side of your face you unconsciously favor in emotional expression, is always presented to you as if it were your weaker side. It captures you at rest, under the condition of self-examination, which is a facial state no one else ever sees, and it shows you a face stripped of all temporal information, all the movement, all the sequencing, all the characteristic patterns of transition that constitute, for everyone else, the primary content of your face. The map your brain holds of your face, built almost entirely from this instrument, is systematically biased in at least 4 independent dimensions simultaneously. The cartographer's first rule is that the accuracy of a map is determined by the quality of the measurements from which it was constructed. Your map was made with the worst possible measuring instrument for the task, and you have been navigating with it your entire life. Now, here is the mechanism, the physical chain of events that the gesture you just performed begins to address. In the first second of touching your own face with both hands, 2 signals reach the somatosensory cortex simultaneously: tactile input from your fingertips and proprioceptive feedback from your facial muscles. Proprioception, the sense of where your body parts are in space, mediated by mechanoreceptors embedded in muscles and tendons, is the oldest continuous sensory channel in vertebrate life. It predates vision by hundreds of millions of years. In the face, the proprioceptive network is extraordinarily dense. The trigeminal nerve, the largest cranial nerve, carries proprioceptive signals from the jaw, lips, cheeks, and forehead through a 3-branch network that makes roughly 157,000 synaptic contacts in the trigeminal nucleus of the brainstem alone. That number is not metaphorical. It is the count from histological work by Per Brodal and colleagues at the University of Oslo in the 1980s, a figure that has held up across decades of subsequent neuroanatomical investigation. What happens in that first second is a collision between 2 representations: the tactile map your fingertips are drawing of the face they are touching, and the proprioceptive map your facial muscles are maintaining of the face they inhabit. These 2 maps were built on different information. They do not perfectly coincide, and the slight discrepancy between them, felt as a subtle mismatch, a quality of strangeness in touching your own face slowly, is the signal that the brain is beginning to update. In the first minute, if you continue touching slowly, something more structural begins. Lisa Feldman Barrett at Northeastern University, working across a series of studies published between 2006 and 2017, demonstrated that the brain's predictions about the body, including the face, are not passive readings of incoming sensory data. They are active top-down models that the brain imposes on the incoming signal, and which it updates only when the prediction error is large enough to force a revision. The brain, in her framework, is not a camera. It is a hypothesis generator. It runs a continuous prediction of what the body's sensors should be reporting, based on its stored model of the body. And it updates that model only when the discrepancy between prediction and reality crosses a threshold it cannot ignore. The slow, deliberate tactile exploration of your face generates continuous proprioceptive and cutaneous input that the brain's stored model of the face was never built to handle. The stored model was assembled from mirror glances. It contains no data from sustained bilateral haptic exploration. The prediction error is real, novel, and persistent. Not the brief mismatch of a glance, but a sustained correction signal. The brain, faced with a prolonged stream of input that its model cannot account for, begins revising. This revision process does not feel dramatic. It feels like nothing, most of the time, or like a quiet settling, a subtle shift in the texture of your internal sense of yourself. But neuroimaging evidence from Barrett's group and from complementary work by Antoine Lutz and colleagues at the French National Institute of Health and Medical Research, published in 2004, shows that sustained body-directed attention activates the insular cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex, regions associated with interoception, the brain's model of the body's internal state. These are not regions that activate when you look at your face in a mirror. They are regions that activate when you feel the body from within. The third layer of the mechanism is the one that nobody expects. The cortical model of your face is not only used for perceiving your appearance, it is the substrate on which your emotional expression is predicted, generated, and regulated. Barrett's theory of constructed emotion, contested by some, supported by an accumulating body of converging evidence, proposes that what you experience as a discrete emotion is not a preformed state that your body has and then expresses on the face. It is a prediction your brain makes about what internal state best accounts for the body sensations it is currently receiving. The face is part of that loop, not merely its output. This means that the systematic error in your model of your face is not only a perceptual error about appearance, it is also a systematic error in the interoceptive feedback loop that helps generate emotional states. A brain that carries an impoverished model of how its own face moves, one built from mirror glances rather than from rich proprioceptive data, is a brain that is making emotional predictions on the basis of a corrupted map. Not dramatically, not pathologically, but consistently, over a lifetime, in the direction of the systematic biases the mirror introduced. What the pharmaceutical industry would charge to modify interoceptive predictive accuracy through proprioceptive recalibration drugs, through targeted biofeedback, through months of bodywork, runs into thousands of dollars, requires clinical expertise, and achieves at best partial results. The gesture you just performed, holding your face in your hands for 60 seconds, applying sustained bilateral haptic attention with eyes closed, costs nothing, requires no apparatus, and begins the correction signal within the first 10 seconds of contact. The body already knows how to update the map. It only requires the input. This series exists because the body's mechanisms deserve to be understood at the level of physics, not just wellness. If you find that useful, subscribe and like. It helps this kind of content reach people who need it. Now consider what the chronic absence of this mechanism produces. Almost no one in modern life touches their own face slowly. Children do. Toddlers explore their faces constantly, running fingers over their own features with the focused attention of someone learning a new terrain. By adulthood, contact with one's own face has been reduced almost entirely to functional gestures. Applying product, wiping away irritants, scratching itches. The slow, non-instrumental exploration of one's own face through touch essentially stops at around age 5. That is approximately 40 years of sensory deprivation for one of the most densely innervated structures in the human body, if you are a 40-year-old adult. 40 years during which the brain's model of the face received almost no proprioceptive correction input and was updated instead almost entirely by mirror glances, an instrument calibrated at the wrong scale, producing the wrong kind of data, from the wrong angle, under the wrong conditions. The symptoms of this deprivation are not what you would expect. You would not feel it as a loss, because you never had the reference. What you feel instead is a cluster of experiences that you have attributed to other causes. The pervasive, low-level uncertainty about your appearance that no amount of reassurance fully resolves. the gap between how you believe you look and how you feel you look. A gap that often yawns widest in photographs. The one context where the face is captured in motion and from angles the mirror never provides. The quality of dissociation that many people report when watching videos of themselves, a sense of estrangement from the face on screen, a recognition that does not feel like recognition, that the person on screen is familiar but not quite continuous with the person you believe yourself to be. There is a subtler symptom, less often named. The same interoceptive loop that maintains the facial model also maintains the brain's running predictions about your emotional states. A face that exists in your neural model primarily as a static visual object, rather than a dynamic proprioceptive field, is a face whose micro-movements are less fully integrated into emotional processing. The result is not numbness. It is a mild lag in the coherence between what you feel and how your face moves, experienced by most people as a background sense of being slightly out of sync with themselves. The feeling that what shows on your face does not fully match what is happening inside. This is almost always attributed to emotional suppression, to social conditioning, to the density of the interior life against the poverty of the exterior expression. The physical reading is more specific. The model and the moving face were never properly synchronized because the model was built from a mirror and the face has always moved. The common reformulation for this is psychological. It is attributed to self-esteem, to body image, to anxiety. The physical reformulation is more precise. The brain's interoceptive model of your face was built at the wrong scale from the wrong instrument and has been running on that corrupted dataset for decades without correction. The estrangement you feel when you see yourself in a video is not a failure of self-acceptance. It is an accurate signal that the model and the measurement disagree. You are not failing to recognize yourself. You are recognizing correctly that the face on the screen does not match the model you built in the mirror. The calibration error, experienced as decades of accumulated mismatch, reads exactly like the symptom of a deeper problem. Because in a physical sense, it is. If you want to understand how deep the gap goes, consider the evolutionary machinery underneath it. The proprioceptive facial system that the slow touch exercise activates is not a recent structure. The trigeminal nerve is among the oldest neural architectures in vertebrate anatomy, present in essentially the same form in fish, amphibians, reptiles, and mammals across more than 500 million years of evolutionary history. The capacity to feel one's own face, to receive proprioceptive feedback from the muscles of expression, from the jaw, from the region around the eyes, is one of the most ancient continuous features of vertebrate neurology. Contrast that with mirrors. Polished metal mirrors capable of producing a reliable reflection have been in human use for approximately 8,000 years. Glass mirrors with metallic backing, the instrument that produces the image we now treat as authoritative, were invented in Venice in the 13th century. That is 700 years of the mirror as primary instrument of self-knowledge, against 500 million years of proprioceptive facial sensation as the original instrument. 700 years is not even a rounding error at the scale of the nervous system that is being asked to use it. The trigeminal nucleus, the insular cortex, the proprioceptive loop between the facial muscles, and the somatosensory cortex. These structures were not built to receive a reflected image of the face as their primary data source. They were built to receive touch, movement, warmth, pressure, the sustained physical experience of having a face that makes contact with the world. The mirror arrived so recently in evolutionary time that the nervous system has had essentially no time to adapt to it. We are using a 500 million-year-old instrument to read data provided by a 700-year-old technology and experiencing the mismatch as a personal problem rather than a calibration error. Now you have the mechanism. Here is how to use it. The effective version of this exercise requires 60 seconds of sustained bilateral haptic attention. Both hands on the face simultaneously, eyes closed. 60 seconds is the minimum duration that sustains the prediction error signal long enough for the insular cortex to register the update. 30 seconds is insufficient. The brain categorizes brief, unexpected sensory input as noise and disregards it. The update requires duration, The posture matters in a specific physical way. If your shoulders are elevated, pulled toward your ears by chronic tension, the trapezius and levator scapulae muscles feed a proprioceptive signal that is partly processed through the same trigeminal pathways as facial sensation. Relaxing the shoulders before you begin and letting them drop by consciously releasing the muscles reduces the competing signal and allows the facial proprioceptive input to dominate the update. This is not advice about relaxation. It is a signal-to-noise adjustment with a mechanistic basis. The pressure of the hands should be light enough that the skin moves slightly, enough to activate the Meissner corpuscles in the dermis, which are the mechanoreceptors responsible for detecting light touch and spatial texture, but not so much pressure that you activate the Ruffini endings deeper in the subcutaneous tissue, which respond to sustained deep pressure and generate a signal associated with structural loading rather than surface exploration. You can feel the distinction. The lighter pressure produces more spatial information, a clearer sense of contour and texture. The heavier pressure produces warmth and a slight dulling of that information. Move slowly, no faster than the rate at which you can consciously attend to what your fingertips are reporting. This is a speed of roughly 1 centimeter every 2 to 3 seconds. At this speed, the somatosensory cortex can form a coherent haptic image of the surface, rather than receiving a blur of simultaneous signals it cannot resolve. The signal you are providing requires the same processing time as reading raised type by touch, which is to say, it requires deliberate attention, not movement. If you have limited use of your hands, the same proprioceptive correction can be initiated through the facial muscles themselves, without external touch. A very slow, sustained smile. Not a genuine social smile, but a slow bilateral contraction of the zygomaticus major, held for 30 seconds, attended to carefully, generates proprioceptive feedback from the exact muscles whose output your brain uses to predict emotional state. The update is less spatially specific than bilateral touch, but it activates the same interoceptive loop through the same cortical structures. The signal that the mechanism is working is simple. Within 30 to 45 seconds, your face will begin to feel more present to you. Not different. Present. The slight quality of abstraction that your face normally has in your own experience, the sense that it is somewhat remote from you, known mainly through its reflection rather than its sensations, will begin to lift. If you feel nothing, you are either moving too quickly or pressing too hard. Do not do this more than once or twice a day. The interoceptive update is a genuine neural process with a resolution time. Repeating the input before the brain has had time to consolidate the correction does not accelerate the update. It generates competing signals that prevent it. Before you keep watching, tell me in the comments, when you see yourself in a video or photograph, which part of your face surprises you most? And does it always surprise you the same way? Or does it depend on the context? I want to know whether the gap is consistent or whether it shifts. There is something worth sitting with after the mechanism has been explained. The face you carry in your mind, the image you believe represents how you appear to the world, is a map. All maps are incomplete. All maps introduce systematic distortions when they reduce a three-dimensional, dynamic, temporally extended reality to a two-dimensional, static, single-instant representation. The cartographers of the 15th century knew that their maps introduced distortions at the edges. They wrote, "Here be dragons," to mark the regions where the projection had failed. The mirror, as a map of the self, also introduces distortions at the edges. And the edges of the mirror are not the physical borders of the glass. They are the dimensions the mirror cannot capture. Movement, time, asymmetry in motion, expression in transition. Every time you have felt a gap between how you believed you looked and how you appeared in a photograph or a video, you were standing at the edge of the map. The dragons were real. They were not flaws in your appearance. They were flaws in the instrument. The face that lived in the video, dynamic and temporally extended and multi-angled, was always more accurate than the face in the mirror. Not because cameras are better, but because movement and time are the primary dimensions of a face, and the mirror is constitutionally unable to record them. What the gesture returns is not a better image. It is a different kind of knowledge, the knowledge that was available before mirrors existed, the knowledge that the nervous system was actually built to receive. The face felt from within. Its architecture, its temperatures, its asymmetries, its proprioceptive textures. Not the face as seen, but the face as inhabited. And perhaps this is the deeper physics of it. The body contains, at every spatial scale, two fundamentally different kinds of information about itself. The external model, built from observation, which is always a representation, always a projection, always rendered from a single angle onto a lower dimensional surface, and the internal model, built from sensation, which is always partial, always biased toward the regions of highest innervation, but which is the only model that was built from the inside. You cannot step outside your own body to observe it objectively. The laws of physical observation do not permit it. Every measurement requires an instrument, and every instrument has a position, and the position of the instrument of self-perception is always and irreducibly inside the system being measured. This is not a limit to transcend. It is the structural condition of being a body that is also a self. You cannot see yourself the way others see you, not because of some deficiency in your visual system, not because of psychological bias, not because you are not looking carefully enough. You cannot see yourself the way others see you, because seeing yourself the way others see you would require you to be outside yourself, which would make you something other than yourself. The blind spot is not accidental. It is the shape of subjectivity in a physical universe, carved into the architecture of the nervous system over 500 million years of evolution into the specific kind of thing you are. An organism that models its environment from a fixed position, with instruments shaped by that position, and calls the result a self.